Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sama, Sisters Against Mental Abuse. I'm your host, Misty, and today we have a licensed marriage and family therapist named Stacy McCall-Martin. How are you today, Stacy?
I am blessed on the heels of a busy week, but blessed nonetheless. How are you?
I'm good. I had a crazy day. So I'm just happy to be here. So just give us a little bit about who you are and your background as a licensed marriage and family therapist. And also tell us about the book. I think you were working on a book as well.
Yes. So, again, my name is Stacy McCall-Martin. Folks just call me Stacy, and that's all good with me. I call myself a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I hope deal in California. And I consider it, that a part of my title because I find that a lot of times folks are struggling with some hopelessness when they come into therapy. Not a whole bunch because, they would be not thinking that therapy would work. So I say that I hope deal in California exclusively, which is where my license is. I came into the field, I want to say pretty early on. I knew as a child that I wanted to be a therapist. I was just that kid that would get past notes in middle school, asking my advice about relationships. And then high school, I believe it was in 10th grade, I was introduced to a book by Sigmund Freud by my English teacher that blew my mind. And he's pretty out there. He's a psychoanalytic psychiatrist, and he has some pretty wild theories about relationships with mothers, with fathers, around some mental health diagnoses like schizophrenia and bipolar. And he was just so wild with his ideas that it drew me in, actually. So I went into undergrad, majoring in psychology, really wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with that. And it wasn't until my final year, my only Black psychology professor, so he approached me and asked if I was considering going to graduate school. And I was not at the time. And he strongly encouraged me to apply to this graduate program here in California. And the rest is history from there. I did some community mental health, worked at a psychiatric hospital, which is where I met my husband. And now I am a private practice owner. And this is what I love to do. I feel like I'm called to do this work.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay. Wow. So it kind of just started off as a genuine interest, something that you kind of had in you since you were like a teen or a preteen.
Yep. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
a great listener. And it's just when I listen, my mind, I would love it for it to just stay empty, but it's like puzzle pieces coming together for me. So when folks find out my occupation, they either, hush up real quick because they think I'm analyzing them and I'm not. But it's just the puzzle pieces start to come together and I can understand someone more intimately the longer I talk to them, which is why I'm a therapist.
Okay, okay. So, would you mind telling us a little bit about the journey to vibrancy,
Yes.
cultivating a life of fruitfulness for women desiring to live a life of abundance? It's a mouthful.
It is. So the title is The Journey to Vibrancy, Cultivating a Life of Fruitfulness. And I wrote it specifically for women. It can be applied to anyone who feels they are not living their life to the fullest. They believe that there is more to living, but for some reason they just feel stuck. And it's where I share. I'm a therapist that shares. I believe that transparency helps to validate our own experiences, knowing that the person who wrote something that you're reading is something that they had to deal with themselves too. So I talk about the different phases of change that I use with my clients, that I've used, the research that I've done with myself on the different phases of, really looking at your life and your relationships and seeing where change is needed. And that is going to be coming out this summer. I'm very excited. My editor has been very patient with me, but I've been excited this whole way through. This work, and I can't wait to get this out to people who really may benefit from it.
Yeah, I mean, It sounds exciting. It sounds like something that I know I've needed. And it sounds like something that a lot of other people and women would need to trying to, put everything together and kind of, figure out where to start. So I do want to ask about your encounters with couples as someone who is a therapist. And it looks like you work with individuals, but it also looks like you work with couples. I really want to know, have you encountered like couples where there is mental abuse present? And as a therapist, do you have any stories that you could share with us? And how do you handle those situations?
Yes, yes, it's very fascinating. So I love working with individuals. I love working with couples as well. And I find that a lot of the women that I work with are coming out of histories of having relationships where there was significant mental abuse. Some call them red flags. Some couples that are trying to stay together where the red flags are abundant. And it's hard to make the mental shift when you're in the thick of it. So a lot of the times it's not until someone exits the relationship where they realized it was really unhealthy, it was traumatizing, it was abusive, it was downright gaslighting. And so the work that I do is to validate their experience and help them go back and see what were some of the things where their intuition, their gut, the Holy Spirit, whatever they choose to refer to that feeling that says, something ain't right, something is not right here, but persisted in the relationship anyway.
Wow. So currently I think that you mentioned when we spoke previously that you're dealing with clients that are surviving, that are getting through it now. What does that look like?
Well, it looks like a lot of trust rebuilding. So, a lot of the time, trust has been torn down, not even just with the other person or the ex partner, but trusting themselves again. A lot of people, specifically women, have come out of these relationships doubting their own judgment. Like, how did I miss that? He said this, they did that. How did I ignore that for so long? Was I delusional? What was happening? Nobody warned me, or everybody didn't like him and I didn't know why. It is really difficult to rebuild that trust, but it is possible. And it takes patience and consistent work to understand that there's something on the each and there's something on the inside of each of us that it's like a trigger mechanism that goes off when something's not right, like that spidey sense of like something, but we learn to ignore that. So the couples that I work with, we have maybe two people that have come together out of history of being in mentally abusive relationships or survivors of mentally abusive relationships. And I know for me, intimate knowledge of coming out of mentally abusive relationships as well is very validating work, but it's very hard. And like I said, it takes a lot of time and intentionality and consistency for sure.
Okay. And oh my goodness, that is so it's so true. As a survivor myself, I mean, once you can finally get yourself out of that, you go through so many phases of getting out of it. So the first phase is like, feeling all those negative emotions like, oh, I lost this person. What do I do? It's hard because a lot of people that are mentally abusive, they create a sense of dependency. So once you get past this stage of, I would call it addiction, right? This is in my own personal experience. Once I got past that phase of being addicted and realizing, hey, you know, I kind of feel better without this person. You have to then confront the fact that, dang, I let this person say this to me. I ignored this. Every time he did this thing or she did this thing, I would just ignore it. What was wrong? So you're like fighting with yourself. So it sounds like one of the important things that you just mentioned is rebuilding that trust with yourself and like tapping into that gut feeling or not ignoring those red flags. And I definitely, I mean, that's so important because I don't think people really consider that once they get out of mentally abusive situations. They don't see that coming And so many people don't want to get help or seek a therapist. So it's like things hit them and then they feel bad for feeling bad
Exactly.
about, whatever they feel after.
That
So
yes. You
yeah, and
said a
so
lot right there because a lot of us have been raised to keep family business, and as women that grow up hearing that,
mhm,
we don't want to tell our girlfriends, we don't want to talk to our aunt, we don't want to talk to our mother about the things that we may be experiencing because it's like, well, nobody else must be experiencing this because nobody else is talking about it. Fortunately, we live in a world now where this is, not necessarily table talk, but it is
mhm.
being talked about. So I'm so appreciative of, being on with you today because these are conversations that need to be had.
Yeah, and that's another thing when I because I've encountered so many other black women like in this situation, and there's so much shame and so much of like us feeling like we have to carry all of the burdens of everyone and our own, and don't you dare complain about it, don't you tell anyone about it. Like it just, there's some sort of conditioning, there's a lot of conditioning that us as black women undergo, and a part of that is, we got to be strong, deal with it, and then there's another piece of it like, you got to stand by your man, you got to stand by your woman, you have to do these things, you're obligated to do these things, and that creates so much pressure. It just uh I know that when we spoke before, we talked about, this is kind of going off the beaten path here, but we talked about how they don't, like, these black women that are carrying this title of being strong, they don't realize that they're experiencing what you said was symptoms of anxiety and depression. And like all these different things come at us at once. And on top of that, seeking therapy is still kind of taboo in our community.
Most
So
definitely.
yeah, it's deep. But I know that you mentioned, in fact, you just mentioned it a little bit ago. You had your own story. So do you mind if we could, discuss that?
Absolutely. And I know that I have two, that are very significant in my mind. Um, and out on the other side of it, now this is years out of those relationships, I have developed an appreciation, but that took a lot of work. And honestly, it did take time. Time does have the ability to heal, but not time by itself. We have to be very intentional what we do with our time. Those relationships happened when I was in my 20s. And actually, you know what? I think one right after the other. And they happened in a time where I was a young woman, not quite sure of my strengths of being a Black woman, but knowing that I wanted something that felt good physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And we have to be really careful when we are that thirsty. To quote a very prominent pastor and speaker, when we, are in a dry place, we tend to attract thirsty people. And when we are thirsty ourselves, birds of a feather flock together. That's what we tend to attract. And I think because I was so, thirsty and hungry for something that felt satisfying, that I just accepted it. And oh Lord, all of the red flags that I ignored and excused away and just was like, no, that's because of this. Oh no, he said this. And that's what happened. But I mean, lifetime movie quality worth of relationships then, and I can laugh about it now, but back then it wasn't anything funny about those relationships. But I'm an open book, so you let me know what the questions you have, and I can tell you about some of the earliest signs that I excused away.
Yeah, I mean, so like where did you meet these people? What was attractive about them? And then yeah, like what are some of the earliest red flags that you missed?
So one of them I met online. So internet dating was a thing even back then, 2000 in the early 2000s. And this was on a website for, Black folks dating. I don't know if you need, to know the specific one. But there was something about him that had like a very rough exterior, but I could tell that there was a softness. And as I'm saying this right now, I believe other women in my family have dated men very similar to what I'm describing here. So I met him online on a dating site.
Okay, I'm good. Was it Black Planet?
Girl, yes, it was. But
We
then they
only
rebooted
had
that.
that one.
Girl, when they rebooted that a couple years ago, I'm like, the devil. No.
Ooh, okay. So you met, okay, so this particular person, you met this person online and okay, rough exterior. Okay. And then could you kind of talk a little bit about some of the red flags? Like how did, first of all, how did the relationship like progress? Like what happened and how, how did things go and what were the red flags along the way?
The relationship progressed pretty quickly. And you know, one of the cool things, honestly, about online dating is you do get to know an aspect of the person that you wouldn't really take the time to get to know. Now, albeit you're trying to present the best version of yourself, the best picture, the one that looks like the most like you, but like all the blemishes are gone, or this part is sucked in and doing all of that. So this man that I had met online, like I said, rough exterior, but I could tell that there was some softness in there underneath. And the first time we met, I remember thinking like, yeah, like very hood, but intellectual, used the big words, and I felt matched. So that's one of the things that I felt really confident about is I felt well matched intellectually. One of the red flags this first time meeting each other in person was he called me abrasive. Now, again, many years later, I'm like, that's a compliment now. I can use my voice in many different ways. And if I happen to say something that offends someone, that's not my intention. But I don't see the point in sugarcoating things. But back then, I felt pricked. My spirit felt pricked when he called me abrasive. And he said it in a way just kind of laughing. And I got curious for a second and quickly dismissed that. But looking back on it now, it's like someone who felt comfortable enough to tell me that I was abrasive on the first meeting. It's like, do you not care enough to sugarcoat? Like what's happening here?
I'm curious, like what led up to that? Were you talking about something that you were passionate about or like what led to
Honestly,
that?
I think it is just the blessing of being raised by a single Black mother myself, and being able to, call a spade a spade. Like I said, I've learned to, sprinkle a little sugar now when I'm speaking, but I call stuff for how it is. And if I have a question, I have a question. I was always that kid that when the teacher thought they was done talking, that was it. No, Stacy would have her hand up raised because I got more questions based on what you said. And so it was that situation where he may have said something, I might have asked a question or pointed something out. Mind you, this is my therapist's mind even back then. And I think it offended him, and the natural reaction was, "You're abrasive." And I'm thinking, like, trying to chew on this and see if I like it or not. I was intrigued, to be honest with you. I was a little intrigued, just reminding that I felt matched intellectually. So, someone who felt comfortable enough to tell me that I was abrasive at the first, in person encounter, I was like, okay, let's see what kind of game of chess we can play here. Now, mind you, I don't play chess. I could look at it and maybe name some of the little thingies that you move around, but I don't play chess. And I felt like from then the game was on. The game was on. It was
So,
uh-huh.
sorry. Okay. So, do you know what negging is and do you feel like that's what that was?
No, I think I've heard of the phrase, but I'm not clear on what it means. If you
Negging
want
is like when it's always dudes that do it. I'm sure women can do it too, but it's like kind of they'll say something that's like not damaging to your self-esteem, but they'll it's like a low blow and they say it to kind of manipulate your behavior. So in that moment you were curious or you wanted to ask something or whatever, and when he called you abrasive, it could have been seen as a way for him to make you be less curious.
yeah.
So like if if you
That is
call someone aggressive, like, you know how they weaponize the word aggressive against black women, like they weaponize that word against us, and they're really just trying to make us do something. So like, they, oh, you're aggressive, why are you like this? And so the goal is to get us to do
say
something,
something.
be more soft, quote unquote, or stop whatever we're doing. So looking back, do you think that that was what he was trying to do?
Absolutely. I looked up the definition, and as you're explaining it, that's exactly what it is. Negging is the practice of giving backhanded compliments and generally making comments that express indifference toward another person, usually a woman, in an attempt to seduce that person. So this is on dictionary.com. And
Oh, you fast. You are so quick.
yeah, I guess one of them things, I guess. No, because I'm
Yeah.
curious. Like I just have that natural mind. And absolutely, like I said, the game was on at that point, and because I felt matched intellectually, and it was the first time in my life I had ever been called abrasive. I actually mentioned that incident in my book. It's funny that that came up, but yeah, I'm looking back now, and I think that was the start of something that was very toxic. Made me question myself as a woman, now as a mother. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
this thing kept going. So early on, he's like saying this kind of stuff. Where did it all go from there?
Like I said, it escalated quickly. It manifested into long phone calls that would go into the early morning. It turned into, coming over late at night, coming over early in the morning with the excuse of I'm working, I'm working late. I have to show up and do this. Can I come over? Can I come over? Can I come over? Now, mind you, I'm in my early 20s. So not thinking too much about it, like, oh, this is comfortable, but never really gone out, never went out. I would ask, and there would always be a reason why we couldn't. Let's just hang out. Let's just stay in. Let's watch TV. We could go get some food and let's just go back to your place, kind of thing. And I felt, like I said, thirsty, starving for something that felt good mentally, physically, emotionally, pseudo spiritually. And that's what it was. It felt good. Everything about it felt good until, some of and this lasted for years. And even some of my girlfriends had some questions that I couldn't quite answer, like when are we going to meet him? Can he come hang out for this? And it was I then started giving me excuses as to why he couldn't, and I believed a lot. I think that's one of the things, in these types of relationships, when you start to believe the foolishness that you're fed. That's what happens. That's what becomes our inner voice. When we hear something so much we start to believe it's true, that becomes a part of your dialect, the things that you tell yourself. And that's what I did. I was telling myself that this was true, but it was also damaging my worth. It was damaging my value based on, oh, I could come, but I can't get there until 2 o'clock. Or I'm on my way and never come through, never get a text message, phone call, nothing, nothing.
So
Like I
was
said, it went on for years.
so was this isolation, or was it like you weren't able to go out because he would be upset? Like what exactly was going on there?
I'm glad you asked that, Misty. And yeah, it was definitely he would get easily upset with some of the questions that I would have, and I think out of punishment, if you will, we wouldn't go out, or because I asked this question, or I keep bringing this up, and I need some time, or I'm going out of town for a couple of days. All of it felt like it was my fault. And I'm like, I really don't feel like I'm asking questions that are inappropriate for us to be in a relationship. Um, and so it came across just like, well, this is normal. Again, nobody else is talking about relationships like this, but even for me, with the friends that I had, and I would say little things, and this is the value of having older women in your circle, in your sphere of influence. I had one of my colleagues who was a little bit older than me, and she shed some light on some of the things that I would say to her about the relationship. And of course, I would just excuse it away. Great advice, but I would excuse it away because advice doesn't keep me warm in the middle of the night. Advice won't come over with, a burger and chili fries at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Mm.
And so it's one of those things where it's just like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna tuck that in the back of my mind. but I'm still gonna hit him up. I'm still gonna answer every time an unknown call comes across my phone. I'm gonna answer because 7 out of 10 times it might be him.
So what were some of like the major incidents that you remember? Because oh my goodness, I'm and I've never heard this story from you before, but based off of what you said, I think that I've dated a man like this as well. And it sounds like at some point you would be walking on eggshells. Did it get to that where you were so afraid that he would be upset and that an argument would happen that you were like hyper vigilant, I would say?
Absolutely. Like I said, every time, this was before the scam likely was a thing. This is why I answered every blocked call, unknown call. I would answer because that's how he would call me. Or sending messages still through Black Planet, even though we've met each other in person. You've been to my house, I hadn't quite been to his. I think one of the major incidents was when I went to his home. I think when he said he wasn't home and he was there sitting on the porch, I think smoking or something like that.
What?
It blew my mind because I'm like, what is it about me that, one, you can't tell me the truth, two, have such a blatant lie, and three, be so upset when I come by your house if we're seeing each other? Like, it made me question, like I said, my worth, my value, my sanity. Like, I'm not making this up, right? Like, this is a real person. At this point, I had some contact with like his stepbrother, some extended family, and it blew my mind. It blew my mind. If I could have a conversation with my younger self, my goodness. But that was a major incident for me, and it made me further not trust him. But it didn't make me leave because it was like, okay, you're at home. Nobody's at your home. You're on the front porch. You're chilling. You just, for some reason, didn't want to see me. So
So did that end up being an argument? Did that end up being an argument or
it didn't end up being an argument like I had plans, because I can get mouthy sometimes, but mind you, he was intellectually matched with me, so could he. And he had an excuse for it. I'm, going through something. I need to have this time to myself. I can't have you popping up here like this. It stresses me out. My family's gonna see me upset and they're gonna ask questions. I don't want them to think like this of you. It quickly became me, about me. And I think for any young woman who has had, a challenging upbringing or didn't have a necessarily stable father figure in the home. I had a stable father figure, but he wasn't in the home. It really just made me doubt myself. And I think just a series of bad decisions after that, and after that, yeah.
okay. So did you ever realize that something was wrong? Like when did you realize that this is not right?
I got that feeling when I got a text from his daughter's mother, um, asking some questions or making it seem like I was some other woman. So of course that cast a whole shadow of doubt. Like, of course I knew he had a child, and of course some dealings with the child's mother as a result. But that one just felt too intimate. Like I know that some folks can co-parent and it not be a thing. I've learned that it takes a whole heck of a lot of emotional maturity that he did not have at that time. And that was something, again, excused away, but it was like, how can I ignore? How did this woman know so much about me? How does she have my contact information? So I'm thinking, how are things so cool that she can get her hands on your phone? Just these kinds of things. And again, excuses and reasons and explanations, and it wasn't adding up. But again, I was fed in a way that I felt like I could still hold on, still hold on.
Okay, okay. So like breadcrumbing kind of.
Mhm.
So what was the big incident that caused you to separate from this person?
The biggest incident, and it wasn't like a showdown type situation, we did end up having a child together. And it wasn't until I had my son that I realized I don't want my son thinking this is what a healthy relationship looks like. or this is what love is supposed to look like. I didn't want my Black son seeing his Black mother being treated like this by another Black man. And I was done. My son was 6 weeks old, 6 to 8 weeks old when I had made that decision. And when I made that decision, I was done. You couldn't tell me nothing after that. And when I mean done, I mean court paperwork kind of done. And it felt different than the other times when I felt like I was done or I thought I was done, because I wasn't doing it just for me. I was doing it for a generation, that I could directly impact. I was doing it for my son and anyone that he would encounter. And I knew that that kind of relationship had to stop. There wasn't anything that was okay by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh wow. So it was just like your son became the motivation
Yeah.
pretty much for you to get out of that. So
An epiphany situation. Like I said, it didn't come hard. It came just like my head was out of the clouds. Like, Stacy, you have to do better than this. You are better than this. And yeah, it was something that I don't regret at all.
oh yeah, that's the thing. I always try to get other women to see like when you're in it, they create a sense of dependency, like I said, and it feels like if you leave that relationship, it feels like it's going to be the end of the world. Like it's hard to see a future outside, but once you do get that clarity, you're like, hey, wait a minute, I don't need this. I can live my life way better without this person.
Right.
So I want to know a little bit about your support system through this relationship. I know it sounds like he isolated you and you might have lost some of those connections, but did you have anyone that was in your ear one way or the other, like someone who was supportive of you leaving, or someone who kind of encouraged you to stick, stand by your man kind of deal?
Whew. And what's difficult is when I've gotten that both spectrums, both ends of that from the same person at different times. So I'll say yes to all of it. Yes. Having older women be able to, question, what's really happening here in a way that I couldn't understand. That was really helpful because it was they cast doubt with those questions, and it was in a very healthy way that made me think about things that I was trying to excuse away. So having, friends that are older than me, who have been through, who lived a little longer, that was really helpful. And also my best friend, and my twin sister, who have been there, my best friends over 20 years now, and my twin sister, obviously, my whole life. Their just steady nature of being there, rain or shine, that really helped. And of course, we know women can dog a man if they really want to, but they never did that. They were just there. And, what do you need? Or, that's messed up. Sometimes it's okay to hear that because it allowed me to arrive at, decisions when I was ready, and they were there. They were there. And that was really helpful. Really, really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I know that like your support system can kind of make or break, kind of make or break you in these kind of relationships too.
Yeah.
So wow, as a therapist, could you talk to us a little bit about your healing process? Like what and like how did you becoming a therapist help you with that healing process? Was there anything that you learned? Did you see things differently? What can you tell us about your perspective as someone with additional education, like, being a therapist and this healing process? Or that was probably too many questions at one
No, no, no. It's a really good question because honestly, they don't teach you this stuff in graduate school. Not for people of color. It's a lot of on-the-job training and developing an understanding and appreciation of the things that we have gone through personally that can impact the work that we do clinically. So I have a different understanding of it. And the healing that I did after that relationship was allowing my heart to love again, in a way that was scary but comforting at the same time, but very different. It was validating, the experience that I have, loving again after that relationship, but the work or the understanding of what was done, um, Honestly, I want to say that I'm still rebuilding after that. And especially now my son is a preteen. So we need the patience of Job to be able to parent a preteen without catching a case, let me tell you. And so it's just therapy, going to a therapist. I'm a Black woman, licensed therapist, and I go to another Black woman, licensed therapist. And it's just something about that experience that is very validating. I've gone to therapy before by clinicians who weren't Black, and it helpful, but just different. Like you feel seen and heard in a different way when your therapist looks like you.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
my relationship with God has evolved dimensionally since that relationship. I actually recommitted my life to Christ because of that relationship while I was in that relationship. So, like I said, I'm very thankful for the things that I went through in that relationship because I know that it's shaped me in a way that has developed me into the woman that I am today. And I am thankful. I am thankful for that relationship.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, lastly, I don't want to keep you here for too long, but just general advice for other Black women that may be in a mentally abusive relationship, or, like words of wisdom that you can give us.
We have been muted for such a long time that we forget what our own voice sounds like. We should grow comfortable with hearing what our voice sounds like, talking to other people who get it, talking to our friends, talking to elders, talking to therapists, praying to God. These kinds of conversations were not had for a very long time, the generations above us, but these are necessary conversations that are taking place now. And if your support system, your tribe, your girls are not the type of people that you can talk to about your relationship, get my book, number one. Number two, consider who you call friends, consider who you call family, because you need to feel whole. You are whole wherever you are right now. And if you feel like you can't talk about something, that's because there's a problem. And sometimes our problems can get so big that we think we can't be helped. But that is precisely what we need. We need help. And it starts with a conversation.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. It's been, I'm so glad to have you on. Thank you for taking the time to do this and then offering your story and your perspective as a therapist. And so thank you so much, Stacy, for being on today. We will look for your book.
This platform is amazing, and I will definitely continue to, be a part of this, and be instrumental in having the conversation. I'm so grateful for you for this opportunity.
Yes, and we are going to be looking for the journey to vibrancy. Do you have a release date? I know you said this summer, but do you know when?
Yeah, this summer.
Hey, that's no problem. Just, let us know when it comes out.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you, thank you. I truly appreciate it.
And that concludes our episode for today. Thank you for joining us. If you are a Black woman who has a story to share about mental abuse, whether with family, romantic partner, friendship, or you are a Black woman in the mental health field, please reach out to us, samatogethernow@gmail.com. We are on Facebook as Sisters Against Mental Abuse, and we are also on Instagram at Sama Together Now. Thank you for joining us, and remember, mental abuse is abuse.